Welcome. I'd like to thank you guys for joining me to be honest, I'm not sure just yet if this is episode 16 of the mini lecture series, if this is episode 1 of the Trail podcast, or if this is kind of a combination of the two. I'm kind of going to play that one by ear. I'm Jonas Spencer, founder of JDS Philosophy and author of the book, And They Shall Know You by the Trail: How the Paths We Take in Life Define How We Perceive Our Reality. Available now on Amazon, Kindle, and Kindle Unlimited. And I would like to take a few moments today to kind of preface what I'm going to be discussing a bit. See, as a philosopher, one of the things we engage in a lot is thought experiments. And I've found myself kind of engaged in a thought experiment today that it's a very, very almost radical concept. It's something that challenges a lot of the perceptions that we've been taught in life. It's something that it really made me think about life in a completely different light and perspective. And it is something that affects every aspect of each and every one of our daily lives, and that's government. And the thought experiment here is kind of rooted in the idea of what, as a species, are we supposed to be evolving towards? And I've noticed there's been kind of a stagnation in the evolution of the human being. In fact, it could actually almost be argued that we've had a bit of a de-evolution in a lot of regards. And kind of some of that thought process comes from how close in this day and age we are to things like or concepts that were presented in movies like Idiocracy that seemed so far-fetched when the movies came out. And it really seemed like the timelines that they presented in those movies were going to be pretty accurate. And I'm actually almost shocked and appalled at how fast those timelines accelerated. The reality is, the human animal has stopped evolving by and large, but there are segments out there that are. And that's kind of the way evolution works in nature, even. Like, they call it survival of the fittest, and it's the idea that certain traits tend to stand out more than others. And I think right now we're at an interesting point where we still have a decent number of people who have an awareness of things. It's a little different than the rest of the world, and it's actually becoming a more prominent awareness. And that's part of why I've got to question if we've got kind of a block here that's keeping everybody from continuing on this evolutionary path. And this morning, I was thinking about things very heavily, and one of the things I realized was that one of the bigger differences between my groups of friends that have gone deeply into the spiritual stuff, that have kind of been a part of the awakening movement, that have the more philosophical and spiritual minded approach to their life, they all at some level practice self-government. And I know in my own life, I don't need somebody to tell me the right thing to do. I don't need a law out there saying, don't do this because it's not a good thing to do. I understand the core concepts of right and wrong and have my own personal code of ethics, and it may not always run in alignment with everybody else's. But truth be told, most of the way my code of ethics works is if I wouldn't want someone doing it to me, I'm not going to do it to them. in a lot of ways, and please understand, this is going to come off a little cheesy, and I may get some backlash from a few of my friends, but I'm trying to be like Jesus. And like, I was raised Mormon. That's a concept that gets pushed real heavily in Mormonism, but I don't think they do a real good job of necessarily explaining what that really means. And so it becomes kind of a platitude. And so a lot of people don't understand what I'm saying when I say I'm trying to be like Jesus. It's not that I follow a Christian faith. My spirituality is actually omniist. I believe that there's truth within all faiths and religions, and that we are the ones responsible for finding the pieces of truth and finding where man has tampered with the documents and being able to discern the difference. And a lot of that comes from going within oneself and learning to trust oneself in their understanding instead of constantly looking to others to explain to you what things mean and gaining your understanding from an external explanation of the concepts. When you move it internal, you no longer need somebody to say, if you do this, we're going to have to punish you. Inherently, you start to check yourself. You hold yourself accountable for your behaviors, and you find yourself wondering, well, why isn't everybody doing this? Make life so much easier. If everybody was trying to be like Jesus, not trying to say, well, this is what he believed, this is what he would have believed or said, but just taking it down to the base core of love one another, be good to each other, take care of each other, look out for the poor, help the sick. Taking it just to those core basic concepts of being able to work outside of yourself. Selflessly helping someone else simply because you don't want them to have to experience the situations you've experienced, and because you know that it's the right thing to do. You're not doing it to gain access to heaven. You're not doing it to prove anything. It's not a manner of virtue signaling. It's just your core nature. It's who you are. It's where you've got that innate just response when somebody asks if they can buy a cigarette off of you. And quite often they're offering between 50 cents and $1 for a single cigarette. But you can tell that these people, that dollar is probably all they've got. You end up with that innate response of, I don't have any you can buy, but you know what? I'll give you two for free. And the next thing you know, you've just made that person's day. And it may seem like such a small thing, but not only did they end up with 2 cigarettes, but they got to keep their dollar. And yeah, maybe they're going to spend that dollar on something they shouldn't, but then again, maybe they're going to buy a sandwich somewhere with it, or a bag of chips, something to fill the hole, a soda to keep them hydrated. It's hot out here in Arizona. And I've been out on the streets. I know what it's like. It's a challenge every day. But I have to wonder, and the thought experiment I've been running is this. Is our conditioned dependence on external government the thing that is holding us back as a species from evolving to the next point in spiritual evolution? For eons now, we have been conditioned that we follow emperors, kings, presidents, emissars, commissars, czars, sultans, Mikados. I mean, everybody had their own version of it. And we've all been conditioned that that's what we need to be okay. In order to be safe, we need somebody to tell us what's right, what's wrong, what the laws are, and enforce them. But what if that is the very thing keeping us as a species from being able to move without a centralized leadership, but rather just compassion for one another and understanding that every single person on this planet matters? The reality is, if one single person on this planet did not exist, if one star in the sky did not exist, none of this as we know it right now would exist in the way that it does. That's not to say that these things would not exist at all. Rather, it's saying that if there was one minute change to the entire program, one small thing taken out of the equation, it balances entirely differently. What you end up with looks completely different. And you have to wonder if some of these pieces that we have conditioned ourselves to believe are the reasons we are failing.